Let everybody load in. All right. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the webinar on the National Academy of Education Spencer Dissertation Fellowship application. My name is Jack Busby. I am the Senior Director at the National Academy of Education, overseeing professional development and membership at the Academy. With me today is my colleague Taylor Johnson, Program Officer, and Dr. Robert Bob Floden, Chair of the Dissertation Selection Committee and Professor of Education at Michigan State University. Bob, do you want to say a few words?
Sure. Just I've been on the committee for several years. This is my second year as the chair of the committee, and I was at Michigan State for 45 years in a variety of programs. So I'm familiar with many of the areas of work that people will be applying for. Jack?
Thank you. All right, and we will start our slides.
Hold on. Okay, can you see my slides? Okay.
All right. So for today's overview, we're going to go over some technical remarks just about using Zoom webinar. We'll review the fellowship, and then we'll talk about the online application, and then half of the presentation will be on writing for your audience, so the selection committee and external reviewers. But half of this webinar, because we're only going to take about 20, 30 minutes, will be for your Q&A. For an opportunity for us to answer any questions that you may have. So please do use the Q&A box if you have any questions. All right, if you cannot hear us, please do use the Q&A box for us to be able to see it, and then we will try to help triage. If not, then please reach out to Zoom support for help. You may type your questions into the Q&A box at any point during the presentation, and we will respond at the very end. So it might be best just to hold off on writing until the very end, just in case we do answer your questions, but you do have that option to go ahead and use the Q&A box. And then for recording, we are recording this webinar, and we're going to post it on our website and also on YouTube, probably sometime next week. So a review of the fellowship. All right. This fellowship is funded by the Spencer Foundation and administered by us, the National Academy. It is intended to be a capstone to your dissertation writing experience with support and mentorship. If you are selected, you will receive a non-renewable $30,000 stipend for 1 year, and you will attend 2 mandatory retreats, one in the fall and one in the spring. The fall retreat is held simultaneously with our members' annual meeting. These retreats are a keystone of your fellowship experience, and you will receive mentorship from a member or former fellow, network with your cohort and our membership, and receive professional development. During the spring retreat, you will present the results of your research as part of our Fellows Forum panels. You also have the option to participate in a poster presentation at AARA in 2028. Regarding administration of the fellowship, you may directly administer your funds or request your university to administer them. We support either option and recommend you making the decision in partnership with your department. All right. For eligibility, you should be all but dissertation ABD by the time the fellowship period begins on June 1st, 2027. You do not have to be a U.S. citizen, but you must be enrolled in a doctoral program at a U.S. institution of higher education. Your research does not have to be U.S.-based. The award supports the fellowship recipient with a final analysis and writing of their dissertation. You must complete your data collection and initial analysis before June 1st of 2027. If you cannot meet this deadline, clearly articulate in your application how and when you will collect your data, and how this will not impede finalizing your dissertation by the end of the grant period. The timeline that you present in your application is an important indicator in the selection process, with the committee paying careful attention to pre- and post-award milestones. In your timeline, present a reasonable plan for how you will complete coursework, data collection, initial analysis, comprehensive exams, and a defense of your proposal. Your post-award tasks should include, but are not limited to, writing milestones and your final dissertation defense. While the end of the fellowship does not need to align with your dissertation defense, They should not be outrageously different. You must hold the fellowship for a minimum of 9 months, so you should have sufficient work left to fill this timeline. If your defense will be a year or more away from the proposed end of your fellowship, you should ensure you have a reasonable timeline for finishing pre-award tasks. And if you have sufficient time left before graduation, you can submit next year as well. So for the timeline, once the application portal closes on October 8th, the deadline for the applications, A&E staff will review applications for completeness and appropriateness. Staff will then assign your application to 2 external reviewers who are not a part of our selection committee. We tried closely to align your research to the expertise of these reviewers, but perfect matches are not often possible. Reviews are then sent to our selection committee. Several members of the committee will read your application and present an overview of the review and of the external reviewers during a meeting held in February of 2027. In March of 2027, we will notify you if you are moving to the semifinalist stage. If you are a semifinalist, we will ask you to submit an update to our committee regarding your proposal, timeline, and budget. We hold a second selection committee meeting in April 2027, where we will select 35 finalists. We will then update you on your status around May of 2027. The fellowship begins as early as September 1st of 2027. And with that, I'll hand it to Taylor.
Okay, so the application portal. So what you have in front of you is a screenshot of the application landing page. You'll be instructed to either create a new account and or log in. When you do log in, please be sure that you're applying to the appropriate application. And our top ribbon, you can see that the National Academy of Education does administer a handful of grants. And of course, you want to make sure that you're applying to the right one. If you experience any difficulties with the online portal and or you have a question of what the content is asking and or you need assistance troubleshooting and or navigating the portal, please make sure that you contact the NAEd staff for assistance. If you are a previous applicant, you do need to start a new application. Unfortunately, we do not review applications submitted previously. Whenever our application portal closes for a new cohort year, a new application does need to be started. And you'll hear it a handful of times throughout the rest of the presentation, but our application deadline is October 8th at 5 p.m. Eastern. That is for you and your references. You both need to complete the application by this deadline. And that is a hard time and a hard date, and we will not be accepting late submissions, adding additional documents on your behalf, and or editing the application on your behalf after this time frame. So something to note about the application portal is that you are able to save, pause, and resume your progress. So I definitely recommend taking the opportunity to make an account and get a feel for the questions. For example, the format of the questions are sometimes short answer, multiple choice, and or uploading PDFs. You'll want to make sure that you have an idea of what the questions are and in what format they are being asked. To save and finalize your application, you must complete all required fields. You must submit all of the documents in PDF and ensure that that PDF is not locked. This is not only to minimize errors and difficulties for us down the line, but to also streamline your application review process. For instance, sometimes we receive transcripts that are uploaded that can only be opened by the student or an individual from the institution, or sometimes access privileges lock our reviewer team out after a certain amount of time. So before you upload your documents, please make sure that these securities are not in place. It's also very important to talk with your reference writers well in advance as you prepare for the application. You want to give them plenty of time to write a strong letter of recommendation as the selection committee reviews these submissions quite critically. And remember that they also have the same deadline as you do. The application portal will send automated emails when you input the names of your references with instructions and a link to upload their letters. So applicants will receive a confirmation email when a reference has also been submitted. And so throughout every stage of the process, when you submit and finalize your application and when the letters of recommendation have been submitted, you'll receive an automated email. And then, since email is our primary mode of communication, please ensure that when you submit and when you are creating an account and indicating your reference letters, that all of those things are spelled correctly so that you are getting the appropriate updates. Okay, so the last thing I'd like to mention about the application portal is some advice. Number one, please make sure that you take a look at the questions and build in time to draft your materials and reread your materials. You have a little over a month, and so definitely take time to understand what the questions are asking of you and have multiple people read your materials before you officially submit. You are updating a lengthy application in terms of the narrative itself is a pretty lengthy document and about 200 to 500 word short answers within our application. And so oftentimes you want to make sure that you are saving your progress routinely. And especially during the peak few days and especially the last few hours, our application portal does become very popular and it can slow down. And so we want to make sure that you are uploading your materials with enough times to review, save, and make sure that it is officially saved and finalized. And again, submitting early means that our team can better assist you. Since we do have a small staff, we typically have a difficult time keeping up with all of the applicant questions and letters of recommendation questions as we get closer to the due dates. So please plan accordingly and have your questions addressed before the application deadline. And with that, it completes the overview of the application portal, and I'll hand it over to Bob Floden.
Thanks, Taylor. So a few comments about who's going to be reading your proposal, what they're going to be looking for. So when you're writing your proposal, you should keep in mind that your audience is academic readers. That means at least some of the people who are reading your proposal, perhaps all of them won't be people who are within your own particular area of work. We get a wide variety of different areas of work, people submitting, and we have a limited number of members on the committee in particular. In the first round external review, it may be more possible to send to somebody who's working within your narrow area. But once it gets to the committee, you're going to be evaluated by people who have been doing research in education or in education-related research in a variety of fields. And some of the people that will be reviewing your proposal, and it will be certainly some of the people will not be in your particular area. So, for example, if you're a philosopher, as I am, I would have to be thinking my proposal could be read by a historian or by somebody doing research in mathematics education or by an economist or by a policy analyst. And so when you're writing, keep that in mind and to the extent possible, avoid jargon that's particular to your area of work. And if you're using acronyms, any acronyms, make sure you spell them out early in the proposal because not everybody will understand what each of the acronyms is. Even as something as simple as AERA, there might be a reader who doesn't know what AERA is. So the audience will include these many different people across the people in the initial review and on the committee. We can make sure to include nearly all methods and analytic approaches. But still, I'll go back to the first point. We can include somebody who's an expert, and as the discussion goes along, at the committee level, we may, within the committee, be deferring for some particular technicalities to somebody who's particularly expert. But you want everybody to have a general idea of what it is you're doing and why that's appropriate for answering the questions that you have. Just giving a general statement of your work, say, oh, I'm using multiple methods, is not going to be as helpful as saying more specifically what the methods are and how there's an interaction among the methods and how those methods are appropriate for answering the questions that you have. There will be at least 4 readers, at least 2 initial readers, plus at least 2 more committee members. And when it comes down to the final selection at the committee, everybody in the committee is at least looking through the proposal. They'll hear a summary of the proposal from members that have read it carefully, but everybody else will be looking. And so keep in mind, you're writing for a broad audience. In the bar at the bottom, avoid jargon. You may know what it means, and it may be that in your specialization, a word has a particular significance, but you need to be explaining any technical terms for everybody who's going to read this to understand. Next slide, please. So the audience, these are the reviewers, both the initial external reviewers and the members of the committee. They're going to be looking at 3 different things, and these are related to one another, but they're not the same thing. And reviewers are going to be considering the proposal for each of these things. One is the importance of the work that you're doing to education, and not just the importance of the research, but its importance to education. And if you're working in a field where many people in your field do work on other things, housing policy, for example, you need to make sure that you're helping the reviewers see why your work is important to education. The second thing is looking at the quality and the feasibility of the project. The reviewers will be looking particular at the methods that you're using, how they're appropriate for answering the questions you have, and feasibility, whether you're going to be able to do the work that you propose within the time available. And finally, the committee is also looking at you. These fellowships are both about the project and about the person. And we're trying to both pick projects that will make an important contribution to education and make these awards to people who will go on to make a contribution to education research in the future. All of these things should be addressed in your application and in the letters of recommendation, and in both in your application writing about yourself and in the letters of reference for the review for your referees. They should be talking about your career goals and how you're going to become successful. Next slide, please. So the importance of research. What's at stake? I mean, people will just assume that everybody thinks they're working on a question that's important or that wouldn't be something that's worth spending time on. But you need to persuade the reviewers that this is something that's really going to make a substantial contribution to understanding things about education. So if you're working in an area where there's been a lot of work done before, you shouldn't just be talking about how this area of work is important, but how whatever you're going to do is going to add to what's already known. So that's how our understanding will differ based on the outcomes of your research. And be as specific as you can about how the outcomes of your research will be used by somebody. Could be other researchers, could be administrators, it could be teachers, it could be students, that they'll be using this to make an improvement in education. So that's the importance of the question. And then the second area is the quality of research. And this ties back to the first area. You need to say something about your overall research, and very important to say why your approach to research is appropriate to the question or questions you're trying to answer. Strong proposals will often, if they have 3 research questions, will, for each of the research questions, say which of the things that they're going to do will help in answering each of the particular questions. The committee needs to know enough about the specifics of your data collection and analysis so that it's clear that the work you're going to do is going to address the questions that you have. And this is always a challenge if you've got something very complicated of figuring out how much you can put in. So, and you have a space limit. But just to say it's important, you need to start with the importance of the research and don't use all of your space talking about why this is such an important question and squeeze out the space that's needed to let the committee know what you're going to do and how that's going to lead to answers to the questions. It's also important, but in almost every research project, there are questions that can be raised about the limitations, assumptions, things that might be left out. And your proposal will be more favorably evaluated if you acknowledge what the problem, what the issues are, and how you're thinking about either addressing them or saying that their effect won't be that important. And then third, the quality of the application. You're going to be talking about yourself and what you've done so far, and you're going to be giving us a transcript. Most transcripts that we see look very strong. So you need to say, what you've done, why you're spending the effort that you're spending on doing things related to education research, and give us an idea of where your work is going once you finish your dissertation. Many people say they're going to want to become a faculty member somewhere. That's fine. It's not the only thing. Other people say they want to work in the government and contribute to education research in the government, or they want to work for a policy institute, the RAND Corporation, or AIR, or ETS. Those are all fine. Or they may want to go back and work in schools. But whatever you're going to do, it's important that you talk about how it's going to contribute to education research and not just to teaching. Teaching is important, but this is we want to pick people who are going to continue to make important contributions to education research. No one expects your dissertation to be your greatest contribution. It would be great if you write a terrific dissertation, but we're also looking ahead and wanting to see how either as an extension of your dissertation or you're moving on to other things that's going to lead to further major contributions to education research. Next slide. So here are some pieces of advice. Your timeline, you need to show, and there was an earlier slide about the importance of the timeline. You need to show that you're going to be able to complete the work in the time that you have laid out. So you don't want to make it look like you're already done because then this wouldn't really be a fellowship for you. We're supporting people in the final stages of their dissertation, but we want to see that it's feasible and that you have a plan for getting through to the end of the fellowship in the time available. In some fields, dissertations aren't single studies. They're multi-paper dissertations, sometimes written with other students, sometimes written with an advisor. As it says, the committee struggles with these because we're trying to look at the project, but also at the person. And if there are 3 different papers, even all by the same person, the space available is probably not going to allow you to argue for importance and give the the methods and so on for all three, you're going to be better off talking about one paper, one study, particularly one where you're typically the sole author or at least the lead author, and there's some reason why you have to have other people involved, like they're the data collectors, and you need to acknowledge them. And focus on that. You can mention the others, but the committee will really be looking at the one project that's described most of the time. Check your writing. Writing improves with feedback from colleagues and non-practitioners. Now is the time to take an early draft and show it to some other people and take their advice seriously. As I said earlier, use acronyms only as appropriate. And if you use an acronym, certainly say what it is at the beginning. And then support your reference writers. Their letters are very important. And two things. One, they're writing about you, but the stronger letters, the letters that make more of a difference are the ones where the advisor in particular can also talk about the study that you're doing, not just what a wonderful student you are, but about in some detail why the dissertation that you're writing is an important dissertation, important for the field. Next slide. Appendices. So you'll have space limits, and the selection committee is not required to read appendices, and they often won't. So maybe you want to put some in because you think they're really important, but have in mind that they may not be read. So the narrative should include all of the critical information. You shouldn't count on the reader to go to an appendix for more information. And the information in the appendix should be elaborative rather than critical to your description of the work that you're doing. Next slide. And now it's time for questions for any of us. For me about what I've just said, and for Jack and Taylor about the process. And so questions in the Q&A. And Jack, you want to get us started? What's there?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Thanks. So we're going to turn to the Q&A box. As a reminder, folks, the Q&A box is in the bottom right-hand side. I highly recommend you check that out. Oh, Taylor, can you put that back up just one more time? If you think of anything that you'd like to ask us, please put it into that box. But just a strong note first that if you have a very specific question about your research, we're not going to answer it here on the webinar. Please send staff an email at info@naeducation.org and we will help you out. Most of the questions that I see that get very specific are pretty much asking like, does my research project work? And just very broadly, if your project is about the field of education research, then we will consider it for the application. So just keep that in mind. But please, if you do have a very specific question, just email us and we will address it. Otherwise, just to redirect everyone that if you have not seen it yet, please go to naeducation.org and then go to the Dissertation Fellowship page. We have a bunch of content in there. We have frequently asked questions in there. And we also have a button that will redirect you to the portal. Please check out all those resources because they are really good and they will help you out. There's also additional documents in there to help you in the writing of your application as well. So with that, we will begin answering the questions. If you see any pauses from any three of us, it's just because we're trying to keep up with the questions that come in. I already see that we have over 42. So we will see what we can do. We will use the remainder of this time, so about 30 minutes, to answer those questions. If we do not get to your question, then please do email us at info@naeducation.org. All right. So we will kick off. Thanks, Taylor. All right. So I think we're just probably going to be going down the list here. I'll kick off, and then probably Taylor, and then we'll share some for Bob to answer. So is there any requirement on citation format? That was a question we received. There is no requirement, but just a reminder to folks that you have a set limit of pages that you're allowed to use, and then I think you have a page or two for your references at the end. And if you go above that limit, then you are going to be disqualified. So do keep to the citation limits that we have listed on our requirements. Um, let's see here. So, Bob, can you talk a little bit about what makes a strong reference letter? If there's anything that you're looking for or that people should be considering. I will say very quickly
Sure.
that we do have a list of questions that we ask all reference writers to answer, but if there's anything that makes it stand out more.
Well, one thing that makes the difference with a committee is comparing when a referee can compare you to other people in the field. Sometimes they'll say, "I've been working this field for 20 years, and this is one of the best two or three students I've ever seen." That counts for the committee. Or they'll say, I've been a referee for four people that have won this before, and this person is comparable to these people. So it's a comparative thing that isn't just this is a really strong person, but comparing you to other people at your career stage makes for a strong list. And then specificity, not just this is a great student, but here are the particular things that they've done that make them stand out.
Thank you.
A follow-up question to that is someone is asking if there is a priority for references from an education scholar. So they're asking if they should ask for a letter of recommendation from someone who is embedded in education and or someone who is uh, more familiar with their career trajectory. Is there a preference?
Well, so the way that I would think about that is the reference letter should be talking about how, among other things, how the applicant is going to contribute to education research. And if the referee doesn't work in education, it's going to be more difficult for them to say how this person's going to make a contribution to education research. On the other hand, you also want to have people who know your field, and so, ideally, you'd want somebody who's very knowledgeable and a strong scholar in your particular field and has done work in education, so can address how your work in education relates to other people doing education.
Thanks, Bob. And a reminder to folks that one of the letters must be from your dissertation chair. The other letter can be from someone else.
I'm getting a handful of questions about our AI policy and if it's permissible to have grammar/language checks, and do we, as an organization, um, for require people to indicate that in the application. As of right now, we do not have a section for that in our application. And if you do use these services, just be cautious and definitely reread everything that you submit. It's in your best interest, of course, to, use the resources that you have access to, but at the same time, making sure that you're putting your best foot forward. So to answer the question, are you able to use these things? I would also say yes, judiciously. And our application does not have an indication for that. So just take that as you will.
Okay, so we do have a couple questions that people are finding on our page. So we are trying something new this year, and we are going to be providing feedback to fellows. So we haven't done this in the past for dissertation fellows, but we did update our website, and since there's a couple questions that are coming in, we'll share it with folks. Uh, this is not going to be detailed feedback that you will receive. What you will receive are general comments on strengths and weaknesses, and then some other comments as well on your dissertation. Most of these comments that are written are made for the committee members to make a decision or to help them in their decision making for who the final 35 finalists are going to be. What happens is that once we collect all that information, staff will do a review and do some like formatting and fixing and what have you. But for the most part, the information that we receive is that raw information will be what we share with candidates. Um, this means that you're going to receive, for the most part, between two to potentially even six different points of feedback, depending on how many reviewers read your application. It is not going to be, once again, uh, a fully encompassing feedback that you might get from like a dissertation chair or another member of your committee, because not all of the deliberations are going to be written down. So the committee is going to have a lot of discussion as well. External reviewers are going to be providing comments just for the committee themselves. So you're only going to get a subset of the feedback. But one of the things that we are piloting this year, and we've done it for the postdoctoral fellowship for several years now, is to be able to provide feedback to dissertation applicants. We look forward to seeing how that goes. And so, yeah, that's going to be a new thing we're piloting.
Someone has a question about publications and presentations that have not yet been published and or been given yet. Are they able to incorporate those in the application? And is it frowned upon that it's not finished yet after the application has been submitted?
Um, it's better to have publications than to have work in progress. But anything that indicates what you're working on and that it's submitted, we often see in the applications that people will say submitted to such and such a journal, and we take that for what it's worth. Better to be writing than not to be writing, better to be published than not to be published. And like anything in academia, people also, pay attention to what the publication outlets are.
Thank you.
We have an question here about employment. So the goal here for the dissertation fellowship is to essentially provide you with funds for you to be able to focus on the final year of writing for your dissertation. But we understand that 30,000 will probably not cover everything that you need, even if you have internal fellowships or awards from your institution. Um, as a as a level, we do allow fellows to work up to 10 hours. For many folks, this helps out with like securing health benefits. But if you require more, just write to staff if you're an awardee, and we will work with you on trying to figure out a balance between the fellowship and also your employment. So that's not a set rule. That's just more of an early level that we try to hit. So several questions. We are recording. We will be posting this next week. The recording for everyone to be able to see. Um, Bob, a question for you. Do you have any particular advice for folks who are applying for a second time?
Since you didn't get feedback the last time, because the system was different. Unfortunately, you can't take what happened with the committee, but you could still show your proposal to people, show it to your advisors, show it to other people, and think about how it could be improved, not just because you're farther along, but because people see some weaknesses in the proposal that might have led to your not being selected in the last round.
Thanks.
Jack, I actually have a question for you. People are expressing that in the portal itself, there's a question about official approval of dissertation date received. Someone's asking if that's when their dissertation proposal was accepted or when they themselves became a candidate.
Can you say that one more time?
They're asking if that question is asking when our dissertation proposal was accepted or when they became a candidate.
The first part.
Thank you.
Let's see if we have the right answer. So here's a question. Where can we find previous year awardees? If you go to our website, naeducation.org/awardees, if you write that in the URL, it will take you. Or if you go to the website and then hover over fellowships, there will be a drop down that says awardees. That's a great reference to be able to see what we have funded in the past. You'll see that we have funded various different applicants from all over the place. Um, so definitely check that out because it'll give you a good idea. But also don't think that just because your type of research is not represented in that awardee list that we do not fund that type of research. It just means that we haven't received an application to fund or that has made the final selection. So again, if you're within the field of education research or doing work in the field of education research, please do apply.
I've seen a handful of questions regarding the timeline. Um, Timeline in terms of their own graduation date and then when the fellowship starts and how long the duration needs to be. To reiterate, the fellowship can start as early as September 1st, 2027, and that it needs to be a minimum duration of 9 months. And your graduation should be relatively soon after the fellowship concludes.
Bob, there's several questions here about the three-paper dissertation. Do you mind just expanding a little bit further on what you've seen that's worked for
Sure.
you?
So many fields now use the three-paper dissertation. There are a couple of types of three-paper dissertations. One is just that it's not one study; everything is sole authored, and but there are three different papers rather than one research study. In that case, you're going to be best off in picking the paper, pick one of the three papers that you think is doing the most important work, and spend most of your time describing that, and briefly say what the other papers are. Another type of three-paper dissertation involves at least one of the other papers having a co-author other than the sole author. Um, the committee, again, it's you're going to be strongest if you pick one paper and spend most of the time on that. Um, I if it's a paper that's multiply authored, that's not going to say as much about you as if it's a paper when you're either the sole author or um, definitely the lead author. Sometimes some people have multiple authors because they feel like they owe it to somebody who did data collection for them, or for the census department or something, to be listed as an author. But all of the thinking and the analysis and the writing is done by one person. So the way to think about it is focus on one paper and focus on the paper that's going to reflect the quality of your work, as well as being an important question.
Thank you. We have a few questions here about the application portal themselves. If you're experiencing any kind of technical issues, or if you need to change a recommendation email or name, if you need to change anything because you've already submitted your application and you're not able to, as long as it is before the deadline, please email us at info@naeducation.org and staff will be able to assist you. To that end, if we are close to the deadline, please remember that we tend to get a lot of emails and requests for help. And we will work on them as quickly as possible. But if you're submitting requests on the deadline, especially, we may not get to it. So being on time is very important. This is also for your reference writers. They have the same deadline. So it's at 5 p.m. Eastern time. The system does slow down, especially the final 30 minutes of the application portal. Please submit your application ahead of time. If you're able to, do it a day ahead, and that includes your reference writers as well. You are able to submit your application without having your reference letters already submitted. So that is a tactic that you can take, but your reference letters still must be submitted by 5 p.m. on the deadline in order for us to consider your application.
Someone's asking about an AERA dissertation grant, but they won't know if they're accepted until after this application closes. You are able to apply to both fellowships, both grants. We don't discriminate based off of what you've already applied to. However, if you are a grantee for either program, we do ask that you disclose that because we want to make sure that we are ensuring that we are I'm trying to politically say this. We're trying to make sure that we're spreading the wealth and that you are able to take advantage of the fellowship and then whatever other funding that you have. And so we want to make sure that there isn't a conflict of interest in terms of which money you accept and our requirements for becoming a fellowship awardee.
Yeah. Connected to this, if there are external awards that you're interested in, ARA Minority, the Spencer, they have several as well that they will administer themselves. If WT Grant was doing their thing or some of the others were still providing funding, please do go ahead and still apply to those. But if you receive them and you receive the NAEd Spencer, you will have to notify us and you will have to select one or the other. The NAEd Spencer Dissertation Fellowship does not allow you to have multiple external fellowships at the same time. So if you are awarded the NAEd Spencer and the ARA Minority Fellowship, you're going to have to choose one or the other. This does not apply to internal awards. So, for example, University of California System has many different internal fellowships that they award their students. You can have those do not count against you. Please do list them on your application if you have received them. And that means that you can have a lot of internal awards in addition to the NAEd Spencer dissertation. IRB requirements are not required to be fulfilled at the time that you submit your application, but you will have to have IRB approval by the time that you begin your fellowship. So something that you all can do as well, I'm seeing a lot of questions here about length, about characters within text areas. You're able to go ahead and begin an application and come back to it over time. You don't need to do it all in one sitting. So I do recommend that if you have not done so already, go ahead and open the portal, put in your, start an application and look at the questions that we have in there. I do believe we have at least 90%, if not all of them, listed on our main page. But in case there's a question in there or something that's not spelled out in depth, please do look in the portal and you can see what length requirements might be, character limits might be, and that will give you a pretty good insight as well.
Someone's asked what is the latest date that they can start the fellowship? That would be January 1st, 2028.
Sorry, I know there might be some dead air and we're scrolling because we're getting a lot of the same questions, so we're just trying to find some of the newer ones. Some questions here about being international students. Again, you're not required to be a U.S. citizen, but you must be at a U.S. institution. Your research can be abroad. So we do have fellows in the past, dissertation fellows in the past, who are associated with U.S. institutions, but then primarily they're conducting their research abroad. So that is acceptable. There's been several questions about do we have any preferences in what we fund? We don't. We fund anything to do with education research. Again, if you go to our awardee list, you'll see methodological approaches in ethnography, quantitative, qualitative, and those are just the top of my head. There are many that have been represented. Same with disciplines, same with institutions. We don't have a preference, and we welcome all areas of research. Yeah, so a lot of questions here just about the timeline again. So just a reminder, folks, this is really meant to be the final writing phase of your dissertation. So if you need to be, you don't need to be all but dissertation ABD by the time you apply. You need to be ABD around June 1st. If you're not going to quite meet that date of June 1st, let's say July 1st, write it in your application. Let us know. We will work with you if you're a strong applicant. Um, we are focusing on the final writing. So this, or if you're still collecting your data, if you're still trying to put different pieces of your dissertation together before the summer of 2027, that is okay. Just put it on your timeline and let us know. What we are most interested in is that when we provide you with these funds and we do all the great things afterwards with professional development and mentoring, that you're going to be focusing on the writing of your dissertation.
You had mentioned the funds earlier. Can you explicitly provide more examples of what people typically use the funds for?
It's up to you. These funds go directly to the individual. You are allowed to administer the funds through your institution. You are not required to. Most dissertation fellows do not take that option. They receive the award directly. You are then allowed to use the funds in any way that you want, but most funds are, or most dissertation fellows are using them to for cost of living expenses, or some of them will use them for research as well. It all depends on what you're trying to achieve and also what kind of uh, where you're at to be able to support yourself. We do not defer the award. So if you receive the award, you must begin as early as September 1st or as late in some cases as January 1st of 2028. But there are no deferrals.
Just to reiterate on one of the questions about being an international student and or conducting work internationally. The only requirement is that you are attending a graduate school based in the United States, but your work does not have to be focused on individuals in the United States, and you can do the work abroad, and or the research subjects can also be individuals not within the United States.
We've addressed like I shared earlier, a lot of the same questions that came through. Um, do you mind, Taylor, putting that last slide up again?
Yes, hold on, let me find it.
So we're going to go ahead and put the final slide up here again, and then we'll be closing off. And just to reiterate, if we did not get to your question, or if you have a very specific question about your research or about your status as an applicant, please do write to us at info@naeducation.org. Either myself or Taylor will be responding to you. Uh, We will go ahead and paste, there you go, thank you. We will go ahead and put a copy of today's recording on our website over the course of next week and also on YouTube. A big time reminder again, because it happens every year. The deadline is a firm deadline, October 8th, 5 p.m. Eastern. This also applies to your mentor or to
References.
thank you, your references. We will not be providing any kind of extensions or accepting anything that's after this deadline. If you are on the West Coast, especially, we hear this all the time that people will see the deadline and think that is for the Pacific time. It is not, it is Eastern time. So, just a reminder that it's a firm deadline of October 8th at 5 p.m. Eastern. And with that, just want to thank you, Dr. Floden, for assisting us in presenting today. Thank you, Taylor. And thank you all again for participating in our webinar. We hope you have a great day, and we look forward to
And
receiving your
and
application.
thanks for caring to do research on topics in education. Very important.
Thank you all.